Hello, everyone, and welcome to Worlds Untold, helping write more immersive characters, settings, and stories for your tabletop games. Today, we're going to be talking about unrealistic character backstories, specifically when a low level character is introduced as having accomplished feats far beyond what their level would be deemed possible. Games like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder are the height of playable fantasy. It can be really enticing to build a character that's already slain beholders or dragons, fought in massive wars, has really strong connections on the political stage. But when that character is only level 1 or 2, it can be really jarring that their actual playable strength doesn't match up consistently to that perceived storied strength. So, how can we change that? Write a character in such a way that their backstory includes these meritorious deeds, but they can still feasibly begin play at a low level. I've come up with 4 solutions to this topic that are broken down very generally. I call them the Returned, the Time Traveler, the Cursed, and the Braggart. Let's begin with the Cursed, probably the simplest solution I've got today. Imagine your character is at the height of their strength, level like 15 or 16. They've slain fiends, defended nations. In doing so, though, they've got on the wrong side of at least one powerful entity. Maybe they're the champion of some deity's cause, but in executing that cause, they've killed the adherents or champions of another. Out of spite or some other dubious plan, that other deity has now placed a curse on your character. In order to not begin a larger feud with your character's patron, though, that other deity has created a series of challenges your character has to overcome, gradually undoing this curse and retrieving some of your original power with each hurdle you overcome. Or maybe, character in their hubris decided to go on some sort of difficult quest or challenge without the rest of your party, ran afoul of some powerful mage. That mage placed a curse upon your character, sealing your powers away forevermore. In vengeance, your character's original party attacked and was slaughtered by the mage while killing them at the same time. Now, multiple years later, this lingering curse has begun to fade from your character, but the consequences of your hubris remain. With a powerful character that's been cursed and greatly weakened, it can be very potent to consider the effects of the curse and how that's affected them as a person. Do you view the curse as a challenge that you need to overcome? Has it potentially resulted in some sort of lasting trauma on your character? Do you now hide who you are, listening to others tell stories about how great and powerful you once were, but how your mistakes led to the deaths of people as good, if not better than you? In my eyes, this sort of once powerful character who's now forced to face their legacy during their lifetime from the perspective of someone who's lost everything can have some really great emotional stakes, working to overcome what's befallen them, or at least atone for the damages their mistakes have caused. Move on from the cursed. Talk about a different type of character, the time traveler. Now, traveling through time and time magic in general can be very wonky, might add a bit more conceptually to the world than your GM is interested in adding. It can raise a lot of different questions, and sometimes that's just not effort the GM is interested in putting into the campaign, especially if it's not going to make any sort of major impact later on. But for the sake of this character we're talking about, let's categorize this time travel in 2 different: those who've come from the past to the present, and those coming from the future to the present. Imagine for a moment you and your party have spent months upon years working to stop, I don't know, the convergence of multiple planes of existence into one. A plot that would rip the very fabric of space in twain has been stopped at great cost by you and yours. But as this magic ritual crumbles, it it does rip open a brief hole in reality and time, shunting your character a few hundred or even thousand years into the future. In doing so, your body is ripped into a million pieces and rebuilt. All of this power and martial training you achieved torn asunder, cast away in the folds of time. This can really help bake in some heavy emotional layering into your character. Coming this far into the future allows you to see and experience the fruits of your character's labor, what they worked so difficultly to accomplish. You can see the beautiful world that's managed to flourish because of the effort you put in. But at the same time, everyone you knew and loved and cared for is very likely gone at this point. You've got no one left anymore. None of that strength you once wielded that put you at the top of the food chain. So when I think of a character like this, my immediate thought is actually they're more likely to want to retire, live out their days in peace. So let's change that. Instead, maybe your character has found the descendants of your old friends, fledgling adventurers drunk on the glory of their ancestors, and you decide to join up with them, more in a protective manner while hiding who you truly are, maybe claiming to be your own descendant in order to travel with them. Maybe you truly do lean into that feeling out of place in time. Instead, you want to focus on finding a way to get back to where you belong, everyone who knows and cares about you and who you care about. Of course, the very powerful mages who might be capable of this aren't just going to listen to any random schmuck who asks for them to cast powerful time magic. So first, you've got to go and build up your strength, becoming this character with a very influential position once more, so that you can more realistically meet with these mages and plead your case. I like this idea because it allows the story of your character to be baked directly into the lore. You can work with your GM and go, what is a major event in this world's history? And talk about, well, what if I was one of the heroes who helped stop that event? Now thrown forward in time, having to live in the modern era. On the opposite side of that, though, what about a character who's been sent from the future? A lot trickier to pull off, but can have a really nice payoff. The simplest idea for this sort of character is something happened, major event is occurring, and your group fails to stop it. In desperation, one of your party members or a deity or some other powerful entity throws you back in time to the beginning of this, before everything unfolds, so you have a chance to stop it and put things right. This doesn't typically work very well in a tabletop game setting because to make this sort of character work, they would have to feasibly have essentially spoilers for the story of the game, knowledge of the events to come, and it can kind of ruin some of the twists and fun that your GM is planning. Let's write that slightly differently then. What if, instead of getting sent back to the start of your disastrous event, you get sent even further back? Another couple dozen or 100 years back to before your character was born, which creates a time paradox, and that's for the GM to figure out, not my job here. And of course, in doing so and being sent back in time, your body being rewound, you've lost whatever powers you've gained. But now you're at the beginning of, or even in the middle of, some other historical event. Maybe you heard stories about it as a child, read about it in a history book or two. So again, you might have some information on it, but this was something you took more as myth. Something that isn't terribly impactful to you. But at really important times in the campaign, your GM might ask for a specific role, and you end up remembering something from the bedtime stories you were once told. This can make a really, really great moment when the party's a little bit stumped or struggling, and all of a sudden your character goes, wait a second, I remember something about this that might help us get out of this problem. Really, really great if done properly. So far we've got a character who's been cursed, stuck in their own time, someone who's time traveled, coming from a completely different time to their own. Let's build on that time travel a little bit, but also in a different direction. The Return. A character who has, I don't know, lived a very fulfilling life. Maybe you were a great general, a powerful adventurer, like everyone has to at some point, unless you go down the path of undeath, you died. Unfortunate for you, to be sure. Maybe it's centuries later now, decades, years, months, perhaps even weeks or just a few days since you died, though, and a necromancer comes along and raises your corpse to serve them, or some other being pulls your soul back into a body to give you another chance at life. Maybe they're a fledgling necromancer just starting out. They've managed to bind your soul and fulfill your body with these necromantic energies so that you can move once more. But because they're so new to it, and because your willpower is so strong, you break free of their control, gaining full control of your undead form. Of course, has none of the powers and abilities you once had, needs to be built up again from scratch. Perhaps on the other side, it is a powerful necromancer, and you are forced through some sort of pact to serve them, to do their work in bidding when they so require it, but most of the other time they leave you to your own devices, so long as you don't get yourself destroyed. This character is a lot of fun, really interesting, and in my eyes, has a lot of depth to them. Maybe your character did die peacefully and they actually don't really want to be an adventurer again. They lived that life, but whatever circumstances brought them back to life are forcing them down that road once more. Maybe, though, this fledgling adventurer you broke free of, you take a liking to them and decide that you want to see them grow. You see something of who you were when you were younger in them, and so seeing them improve and get better makes you happy, fills you with a sense of pride, and so you decide to travel with them. Maybe your character was stabbed in the back by someone close to you. Your country having stricken your name from the records, exiled in death in history, thinking of you as a villain that you know you weren't. And now you've got a path of revenge, wanting to figure out who killed you, stop them, and regain the glory you once held in life. You can have all sorts of motivations for this character, and because of the idea that you're now inhabiting a reincarnated body that wasn't your original or an undead form, the motivations you can have a really unique twist on them. I think that one's a lot of fun. Last but not least, what I would consider my favorite type of character, the braggarts. Maybe you could also call them the misinformed. One who spreads stories about what great deeds you've done, hasn't actually accomplished any of them. You claim to have slain a dragon, anyone interrogates you, and oh, well, maybe you just helped another adventuring party kill a wyvern. But still, you're telling people that you killed a dragon, and some people are going to take you at your word for it. A lot of times, a character like this is going to be a charlatan, a scammer, someone who is hoping to earn some coin through their stories, upfront job payments, getting hired based off of their reputation, and absconds with whatever wealth they manage to get out of these people. I like to think of them slightly differently, though. Someone who has been truly misinformed about themselves, someone who believes these stories they're saying. Maybe when they were a lot younger, their parents told them all these bedtime stories about the heroes of the world and history, and your character thought that these were about you, things that you were destined to accomplish or had done in your past life. Maybe your family was visited by some powerful mage sharing tidings about a future drought. Maybe a dragon was coming to collect their end of a bargain your parents once struck themselves. Said great figure maybe took a look at you while you were an infant in your crib during that visit. And as you grew up, you convinced yourself that that figure was there for you, to share tidings or blessings about your life. Maybe you kept this belief to yourself growing up until you set off on your own journey. Maybe you shared it with your friends and your parents never did anything to dissuade you from your beliefs. Either way, though, you eventually set off to become an adventurer, live up to this expectation you've set upon yourselves. And 90% of the time, your character in these sorts of situations is going to fail. Maybe you pick up some pretty heavy scars or trauma from it, your worldview shattered. This causes you to become very jaded. You grow much older. As a weak adventurer, you just mentor other newbies as a member of the Adventurers Guild, bemoaning what could have been until something beyond your control drags you out of your stupor. Maybe instead you took this failure to heart, recognizing that you were deluded in your past, but desiring and planning to live up to that vision you had for yourself, walking forward and really pushing to become that person you once claimed you were. You have so many different options, but no matter how you write it, you have a million different ways to write a sort of low level character with these great deeds in their backstory. But please, again, always make sure that whatever ideas you have for this sort of character, run it by your GM first. A lot of these will require quite a decent amount of extra legwork on the GM's part, and they aren't necessarily going to be prepared to include some of these concepts in their own world, especially things like the time traveling, returning, and curse. It'd be a real shame to rock up with a character that's been cursed by a god, only to find out that in your campaign, the gods have no real relevance to the world. Them cursing your character doesn't make sense for the overarching plot. That being said, though, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one.